Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always. Super pumped to have today's guest on the show, William Wendt, Ecosystem Growth Manager at Oasis, where he is working to build the future of Web3 with a focus on decentralized infrastructure, privacy and security, and open source environments. Prior to Oasis, Will worked on the product development team at the Nature's Bounty company, where he managed stability trials and logged different products and materials for compliance with various GMP guidelines. Will also holds a BS in chemistry from Towson University, where he was also a D1 athlete on the men's swimming and diving team. Super pumped to have you on. Will, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Matt. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Pumped to have you, man. I mean, the one thing that pops out at the bio right away, D1 athlete for swimming and diving. I have such a crazy amount of respect for swimmers. I have pretty good cardio. Used to play hockey growing up, was always a bit of an athlete. You know, I can still humble brag, can still crank out a good 5K in like sub 20 without training, which is not bad. I'll toot my own horn there. But whenever I get into a pool, and sometimes I'll swim at the pool in my building, I'm like, how the hell do these guys and gals do this? It is such a different beast. It's crazy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's a different kind of sport, but I loved it. It was a great time. The memories of bonding with our teammates and all the hard work. Yeah, I just have a tremendous amount of appreciation for that opportunity I was given and for the time that we put in and the friendships that I made. And also to say to your sub 20-minute 5K, that's very impressive. If you can pop that out without training, I think that was I can't even come close to that.
No, it's all mental. You just gotta keep the pace and cook it. But how'd you get into diving? Because swimming's pretty, that's pretty standard. Most people swim, and I feel like if you're a good swimmer and you throw up some good times and you're a beast in the pool, it's just okay, well, I'm gonna swim. I'm gonna get good at this. But how do you get into diving?
Yeah, so swimming and diving is just the name of the team. So I was a swimmer. I didn't actually participate in the diving events. Similar to track and field, right? Track runners and then fields do their shot put or hammer throw or whatever their other events are. Right. So I didn't participate in diving at all, but I got into swimming because both my parents were D1 swimmers at St. John's, and that's where they met. And it's been in my blood and my family forever.
I love that. So, well, swimming aside, let's get into the bread and butter of the show. Let's get into Oasis Labs for a second. You and the team are front runners and are truly working some magic in building an open and transparent, blockchain, and obviously doing a bunch with the ETH community as well. I'd love if you could start off by just giving us the quick little elevator pitch, the TLDR on Oasis Labs and the new Oasis privacy layer, and then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Yeah. So Oasis has a modular architecture, which I think has become popular recently with ETH 2.0 shifting this direction, and then other protocols like Cosmos and maybe Polkadot as well, trying to build this type of direction. But basically what it means is that we have a separation of consensus and execution. So Oasis has an underlying consensus layer, which handles just governance, staking, transfers of our gas token on the consensus layer. And then really what it does is validation of transactions that happen on our execution layer. And so our execution layer is made up of parallel runtimes, which we call paratimes. In a lot of ways, they can be thought of as rollups, similar to rollups on ETH 2.0. There's a few differences, but that's a good framework for people to think about it. So we have this separation of consensus and execution with multiple parallel execution environments. The first execution environment we launched was Emerald. Emerald is basically our transparent EVM chain, similar to Polygon, similar to Moonbeam, AVAX C chain. Basically it's a high throughput, low gas cost EVM chain. And then that was our first one. We also have Cypher, which is our confidential smart contract platform supporting WebAssembly. We'll maybe get into that a bit later. But the one that we're really here to talk about today and the one that we're really excited about is Oasis Sapphire. So Oasis Sapphire is the first ever confidential EVM chain. So what that means is it's an EVM network that supports the ability to create confidential smart contracts with encrypted state. So normally the way I explain this is through different examples. So for example, if you wanted to build a DEX on an EVM chain, everything is transparent, as we all know. On Oasis, you could actually build a confidential DEX, so a DEX which hides everything. So it could hide the slippage parameter, it could hide the wallets making the transactions, the tokens they're buying, the tokens they're selling, the amount they're buying, the amount they're selling, it could hide everything. That would be like entirely encrypted state. But maybe for, a variety of different reasons, you don't want to create entirely confidential DEX. And what the really, really cool thing about Oasis is you can sort of move through the spectrum of entirely transparent to entirely confidential anywhere in between. And so, like, for example, instead of hiding all aspects of state, you can encrypt just the slippage parameter or just this order book. And if you were to do something like that, you could create like an MEV resistant DEX, because now, these bots and these actors that are trying to front run you and arbitrage these slippage that you might have on these trades, they no longer would have access to the information, and they wouldn't be able to see beforehand how profitable they might be. And so you could create like an MEV resistant DEX in that way. And so I think the DEX example is a great way of showing like what confidentiality and encrypted smart contracts can do, which is really just like create more sophisticated applications that offer better user experiences. And by the better user experience, I mean, saves you 1% on every trade, but at the same time, you don't lose anything. It operates from the user perspective exactly the same way any other DEX would.
Well, that was great. Can you also just take a quick deep dive into Oasis privacy layer as well, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So everything I explained previously, that's like the Oasis Sapphire, building this DEX on Oasis would be native to Oasis. The other really cool thing that we sort of realized quickly after launching Sapphire is that we can offer other EVM networks the ability to also sort of leverage Oasis Sapphire to incorporate confidentiality into their applications through sort of messaging bridges and gas relayers. What do I mean by this? I mean, again, like the best way to probably explain it is through examples. So right now, if you're on Ethereum or Polygon or Binance Smart Chain and you have a DAO, it's impossible to have an on-chain governance vote, which hides, sort of which wallet address voted which way. And for like lots of reasons that might incorporate bias into like your governance process. I think most of us in the in the traditional world are used to having like anonymous governance processes, but on an entirely transparent EVM network, that's impossible. But so what you could do instead of moving your whole application, let's say, and all your assets to the Oasis Sapphire network, instead what you could build is you could build like a parallel governance module on Sapphire, so that basically when the governance process starts, when a governance proposal starts on Polygon, it sends a message over a messaging bridge like layer 0, multi-chains any call, C-bridge message bus. Like there's lots of messaging bridges. So it sends a message over one of these messaging bridges, which triggers the governance proposal to start on Oasis Sapphire. From that point on, when the user when they go to the governance dashboard of that DAO and they try to submit their vote, it'll automatically switch to Oasis Sapphire. They will send their encrypted message. At the end of the governance process, all the encrypted messages will be aggregated together, and the result will be sent back over to the origin chain. And should the message pass, should the governance proposal pass, then the changes will take place. And you can do like very similar things in gaming, where like you have maybe an RPG game on Polygon where 90% of the game has no need for confidentiality, but you want to put like a riddle in the game with an unknown solution. So instead of building the entire game on Oasis Sapphire, let's say you're already on Polygon and you have a large user base, instead of building like an entirely new game on Sapphire, you could just build a module for that riddle on Sapphire. So what the user experience would look like is you sort of are playing the game, you get to the point of the game where you need this riddle, network switches, you submit your encrypted solution to that riddle. If the solution is correct, a message gets sent back over to Polygon where your on-chain NFT or your on-chain experience or something like that is unlocked. And so in this way, you can sort of use Oasis Sapphire to offload your confidential computation needs while keeping the majority of your application on the network that it's currently on, or whatever network you choose for maybe liquidity or maybe just the amount of users that exist there.
Interesting. So yeah, you guys are utilizing a lot of heavy tech here to give the most efficient, cost-effective, and privacy-focused solution to consumers, which is like 3 obviously massive areas and pain points of crypto. How does your approach differ from others leveraging ZKPs? Because I know ZK rollups are sort of the talk of the town. Everyone's I mean, last year everyone was sort of like, oh, 2022 will be the year. I think 2023 will be the year ZK rollups are going to pop off this year. But just curious to understand how your approach differs from everyone else in your use of ZKP tech.
Yeah. So, I mean, the really interesting thing is that Oasis doesn't use ZKP. We don't use any zero knowledge at the moment, although it's possible to create like a ZK paradigm in the future, which, I think, like you said, ZK is like sort of the hot topic, and this is where everyone is thinking about in terms of privacy. Oasis instead uses trusted execution environments. So trusted execution environments is like a trusted hardware that operates as a black box that all of the validators on our network run. And so the way that the outcomes are very similar to ZK, but there's different trade-offs. And so basically what happens is that all transactions are encrypted by default. Then, when they're submitted to these validators, it goes inside the black box where it is then decrypted. And then sort of the computation is done within this black box and then re-encrypted. The outputs are re-encrypted based off of the parameters that are set by the developer and the user and all that. And so the sort of, I guess, advantage that we see over ZK technology is the fact that within this black box, everything is operating as like a normal EVM. No one can see what's going on, but it sort of operates exactly like a normal EVM. And so from a developer perspective, there's far less friction because you can just code in Solidity and it just works, right? Like it just works out of the box. Whereas I think with a lot of ZK tech, specifically ZK that is working on like privacy versus scalability, there's a lot of like different ZK circuits that have to be built, often different languages and things of that nature. So developer friction is one that I think is really great. The other one is like the ability to create these, like I said, applications that range from entirely transparent to entirely confidential and anywhere on the spectrum in between. And so it gives a lot of flexibility. So you can create, let's say, an ERC20 wrapping standard where only the sender gets to view, all the data associated with the sender and the receiver. The sender, the receiver, and maybe the third-party application who created that ERC20 token.
Right.
But no one else can. And so by doing that, you create like a lot of flexibility. And then the other one is like composability, right? Is like the generalized smart contract execution. All this private data is capable of like talking to one another within this black box, because within the black box, it's actually not private. Like it just runs open. And so you can create a very composable network, which is sometimes hard with ZK, because ZK is not the best at aggregating lots of confidential data together to create, a single transaction or a single computation or something along those lines.
Interesting. On that note, on sort of the whole privacy note, one thing that I've heard you discuss before is sort of the whole issue regarding regulators having concerns about privacy. It's often equated to anonymity, and regulators who perhaps aren't too read up on and switched on in regards to the whole crypto market have this fallacy that no one will never be able to see where money was sent, blah blah blah, and this can lead to illicit uses of tech. I know you and the team have spoke about this. I'd love to just get your 2 cents on what's going on in regards to the whole regulators having concerns about privacy, and how you guys are shifting to empower developers to sort of better protect users' privacy in their apps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the key thing that I always think about in terms of the privacy discussion in Web3 is that up until this point, like a lot of the discussion around privacy has been about these like entirely anonymous transactions. When people think of privacy, they think Monero, they think Zcash, they think privacy coins. They think about how can I make a transaction that's entirely anonymous.
Yeah.
And I think Oasis is a bit different than that, right? Like in many ways, Oasis is about more sophisticated smart contract applications, enabling more sophisticated smart contract applications, and the possibility of offering better user experiences through privacy, but also through confidential computation. So for example, that DEX example I talked about where there was MEV resistant, that has nothing to do about anonymous transactions, right? That's hiding some aspect of your transaction, but it's not hiding who made the transaction.
Right.
But it's offering a better user experience and a more sophisticated smart contract. In terms of like, other examples, gaming. So in gaming, right now, you can't currently build a lot of compelling games entirely native to Web3. And what I mean by that is that most compelling games involve some aspect of confidential logic. So a card game requires you to not know what's in the other player's hand, and you can't know what the state of the current deck is, right? A strategy game often has like this idea of like fog of war, where like an area of the map or some coordinates on the map have hidden resources, or the enemy units can't be seen if they go into that area of the map. Even like role-playing games have quests, riddles, puzzles with some like hidden solution, right? And if you were to try to build that on an entirely transparent EVM, anyone could view this confidential data, and the game basically wouldn't be a game if anyone tried to do that. And so, Oasis for the first time enables these games to be able to incorporate this confidential logic into their game while remaining entirely on-chain. So they no longer have to make this trade-off of, hey, if I want privacy, then I have to take it off-chain, and then I lose the Web3 high integrity and trustless nature. So now they can be high integrity, trustless, and also have this confidential computation. And also the other area I would say is like, data tokenization. So by enabling privacy, it also enables people to own their own data. So like if you want to create your genetic data and sell that to some pharmaceutical company, well, that actually means that data has to be private, or else anyone could just take it. And so these are like areas where I think it's not about anonymous transactions. It's not about like hiding who you are from the world, but it's more so enabling, like I said, more sophisticated smart contract applications with better user experiences.
Totally makes sense there. It is such a crazy issue. What's your hypothesis or hot take, perhaps, if you have one, in regards to regulation in crypto? Because again, things have really been getting spicy over the last couple of months, more specifically with the whole crackdown on Binance. Obviously, we had the FTX blow up back in Q4 of last year. Are we getting close to regulation? Like what's going on in that regard? And again, of course, for the listeners at home, the biggest chunk of our audience does come from USA, and Will does reside in USA, so he could speak to that much better than I can as his neighbor north of the border in Canada. And again, we pretty much do whatever you guys do. So, but yeah, what do you think about that? Like what's going to happen over the next couple of months? Are we getting close to having actual legitimate, solidified, concrete rules and regs put into place, or is that still years out?
I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge or anything along those lines. I get all the same information that everyone else does, but I think that we're probably getting pretty close. If I had to guess, if you just watch the news and you watch, congressional hearings and stuff like that, I think it's like pretty clear that the gears are working. At least our representatives are thinking about regulation. It's coming up more and more frequently. Now, maybe, there's still a lot of education that needs to take place in order to get the regulations where, the crypto industry would want it to be. But I do think regulation is coming, and even with suboptimal regulation, I do think it is beneficial for the industry, because I think, a lot of people sit out on the industry due to the lack of clarity. I just did my taxes, and I can tell you like that was a nightmare in itself, just trying to figure out like, does this count for this? Does this, there's just so little clarity, and you don't want to mess up. And so I think that, the regulation is coming. It might be suboptimal, but, over time we can hopefully get that, to a place that we want it to be. And then like, back to the Oasis end, a lot of people think that privacy is, I guess, like in conflict with regulation. For one reason, the reason that we talked about earlier, that privacy is not all about anonymous transactions. I think that's like not the case. But also at the same time, like I think if you think of like the traditional industries, there's actually like a lot of regulation that enforces privacy, right? In finance, there's these you have to protect your customer and their data. In Europe, we have like GDPR and stuff like that, allowing users to own their data, or at least like have access to see where their data is being sent and how it's being used. And so I think if Web3 wants to compete with Web2, actually privacy and confidentiality are like needed in order to be regulatory compliant and to compete on that same stage.
And it's such a pillar of crypto as well. It's like, you talk about these pillars and obviously privacy probably being at the forefront of it. And then the, cross-border payments, another big one. We really need to start, as a whole, all of us, we really need to start shipping just incredible products that non-crypto native folks can use in order for us to go mainstream, right? It's like without it, there's talking the talk, and then there's walking the walk, right? Like we got to start walking the walk before stuff actually happens. But we got to take a quick break here. Got a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, and that is Prime XBT. We love Prime XBT, long-time sponsors of the Crypto News Pod and long-time friends of CryptoNews.com. These guys and gals created a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is always offering innovative products and professional trading conditions to all customers, and are blessing the Crypto News Pod listeners with a huge bonus. After making your first deposit, 50% of that first deposit, that is 50%, will be credited to your account as a bonus that can be used as additional collateral to open positions. The promo code is CryptoNews50. That is CryptoNews50, all one word, to take advantage of this offer and receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Will. Well, I'd love to get into the convergence of AI and crypto, or AI and Web3. Such a hot topic right now. It seems like every single day, at least my Twitter, and I feel like everyone in crypto has a pretty similar feed, but my Twitter is now, I'd say 20% of my feed is just AI stuff. And perhaps that's just the algo learning that I've been clicking and learning about a bunch of different AI tools and tech. But this reminds me of almost 2021, like Q2, Q3 2021, when it seemed that new DeFi platforms, new protocols, new NFTs every single day. There were dozens of they seem legitimate at the time. 99% of them are insolvent now, but nonetheless, it gives me that kind of vibe where it's just like it's a momentum city, population AI, just like it was momentum city, population Web3 back in Q2, Q3 2021. What's going on right now? Talk to me about the convergence of AI and Web3, and just a little segue about and how Oasis is bringing privacy to that intersection.
Yeah, I think everyone's seeing the same thing in terms of, AI all over their newsfeed. ChatGPT really beat the drum of what can be done with AI. I think overnight,
Insane.
Everyone realized oh my God, this thing that we thought was 5 years, 10 years down the line is
shit's here to stay.
Yeah, it's here right now. And then, it went from 3 to 4 in the matter of a couple of months or something like that, and got even more powerful. So it was really exciting. And, I think, I've been having a lot of fun also playing with all these AI tools, diving into it, seeing, what can really be done. And I think that we've only really scratched the surface of that. In terms of the convergence with crypto, I think that they have a very interesting sort of synergy, and maybe in some places conflicting sort of ideologies. In one sense, AI is very centralized, but in the sense that it requires a large computational power, and normally it's one entity who owns this AI model or something like that, and they can sort of modify it in the ways that they see fit, which with such a powerful technology could be kind of dangerous. But the cool thing about crypto is that it can help offer more decentralized solutions to that. So there could be ways with federated learning and crypto networks to do more distributed AI models. And I think there's a lot of people working on that, so that basically you can democratize this power of these AI models. But from the Oasis perspective, one of the things that we really try to do is work on the privacy of data, because an AI is as strong as the amount and the quality of the data that it has, right? So with a lot more data and a lot of high quality data, AI models become very strong, and that means that we want to give it as much data as possible. But there's a lot of data that is potentially very sensitive to you, and that you don't want to be leaked to the public, especially if it's the centralized entity that has this data and they're using on this for this model. But maybe they've saved this data and they're going to use it for something that you don't agree with at a later point in time, or something along those lines. There's a lot of different nuances to what can be done with that. And so that's where Oasis really gets involved in the picture. So we talked a bit about Sapphire, the Oasis Sapphire network, and one of the infrastructure points that we didn't talk about is basically that the way that Oasis handles privacy is it has this key manager, which gives you access to encryption and decryption keys to view certain events, or to permit you to have access to these events. And you can use that key manager to sort of give users the ability to own their own data, and then have this ability to grant and revoke permissions to access that data. So the architecture would look something along the lines of storing data in some sort of encrypted IPFS, or it could even be a centralized service like Google's confidential VMs, or AWS Nitro, which are all use sort of trusted execution environments, or some sort of encrypted technology. And then you could use Sapphire for the key management. So basically, I own this data. Only I can view it, but I can grant this wallet over here access to that data to do X, Y, and Z for 6 months, given some fee has been paid. And so you can use smart contracts to sort of make sure that the permissions and the access controls are being enforced in a high integrity and trustless way, while also keeping everything private. And then we have like a really cool project being built by our one of our previous engineers. It's called Esprint, and it's being built by Nick Hines. And so what that enables is sort of an off-chain confidential computation. So in the same way that we talked about the black box earlier, where transactions were going encrypted, they get decrypted, they run in there, and the output is encrypted. You can do the same thing with like an AI model. So you can imagine this data that exists in encrypted IPFS. You can allow some AI model. You can create some black box where that data goes into the black box, the AI model goes into the black box. The AI runs and gets the feedback from that data, and then it comes out of the black box, your data comes out, and the AI model has now improved because it's seen that data. You've retained that control over it. The AI has never told the parent company anything about you. And so that's sort of how, Oasis can be used to enable a more responsible data economy. And why that's really important, I think, is because there's lots of areas that have like HIPAA and all these regulations, like for example, healthcare data. And it's like impossible to get different healthcare data providers to talk to one another because they have all these regulations in place, which is good, right? Because it means that your healthcare data is being protected. But at the same time, think about how advanced our healthcare can be as AI becomes more powerful if AI had access to that data. So we have to find the right way to allow AI to access that data while preserving privacy. And so this is sort of why we're building out all this infrastructure.
Interesting. That's so cool. Another thing that you guys did is the partnership with Meta AI. Like, that's freaking massive. Like, that's something to write home about. That's something to tell mom and dad about. How did that go down? That's crazy.
Yeah. So I work for Oasis Protocol Foundations. That's like a labs partnership. So there's like sort of two different entities, but I couldn't be more excited about what we're doing with Meta. In that same way that we talked about earlier. There's with AI. We talked about like the need to protect sensitive information. But, I think with Twitter, with Meta, with all these social media companies, we also have heard massive amounts of claims of bias, right? Like, whether it's bias towards to some political group or some demographic, any sort of demographic. And so it's very important to be able to assess bias, right? But in order to assess bias, you would then have to access all the data that's being used. You'd have to actually know what every single person's socioeconomic class or what their religion or ethnicity or whatever the demographic you're assessing bias for. You'd have to get all that data, which is potentially like a massive privacy breach. So what we're doing with Meta is essentially a privacy-preserving computation technique using secure multi-party computation in order to preserve privacy while being able to assess the bias of specifically a questionnaire of Instagram ads or something along those lines. Yeah.
So cool. Well, that was a great rip on Oasis, but we barely spoke about you. How did you get into crypto? Walk me through your sort of crypto inception story.
Yeah. So as you did a brief intro earlier, I originally went to Towson and got my bachelor's in chemistry. Did a few years working in chemistry labs, and then eventually actually got into crypto through Chainlink. The Chainlink community. Yep. One of my friends was a very big Chainlink proponent. So I got very involved in their, unofficial Discord and their community, and learned a lot about crypto in that community. I mean, I think what really drew me in was, I felt sort of late. It was 2018 and I felt like late to understanding crypto, and, Ethereum smart contracts already existed,
early,
right?
Man. That's early 2018. Come on.
I know, but at that time it felt so late. And so I thought about what is the thing that's going to drive the next wave of adoption? And in my opinion, from everything I researched, it was, creating more sophisticated smart contracts through access to off-chain data. So basically what Chainlink is doing, price feeds and now enable, Aave, and it enables, these lending protocols. It enables, all of these new ideas of what Chainlink would call hybrid smart contracts. So I did that I spent time in that community, but never really started working for a while. And then basically, Chainlink's, I guess that the sort of thesis played out. And I started thinking about like, what's the next thing? And so I found these papers that were co-written with Ari Jules from Chainlink and Dawn Song from Oasis, and they were all about privacy and confidential computation and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I just like dove right in, started doing lots of research, eventually joined our ambassador program. We have a great ambassador program with hundreds of members that, is a chance to sort of help grow the community and evangelize the network. So I spent a lot of time in our ambassador program, eventually joined a subsect of our ambassador program called the Business Development Ambassador Program. So in that part of the program, you spend a lot of time, creating leads and sort of trying to help grow the ecosystem. And then after, I guess, a bit of time in the BD Ambassador program, I was eventually offered a job to work part-time at Oasis as a business development lead. After a few months of that, joined the growth team as the ecosystem growth manager. And so sort of it was just a very organic transition into crypto.
I love that. Getting in on the Discord, down and dirty, doing some work. What a treat.
I'm a big fan of Discord. I think that, if I had any advice for anyone who's joining crypto, podcasts are great and everything, but join like 5 or 6 Discords that are like, highly knowledgeable in the areas that you like.
Be a sponge.
Yeah, exactly. Just absorb all the information. There's so much
ask
you can
questions
learn from a community of like-minded people.
I love Discord as well. My only thing with Discord is I just find it very distracting, right? Like the friggin' notifications, even on the left side, like, on the left side of your Discord bar, you just have all the noties, even if you turn your sound off, which I do. I just find it to be a lot. There's just so much thrown at you. But again, when you can use it properly, the influx of info that you can obtain is just absurd in the best way possible. And it's just, it really comes down to will, right? It's like not will as in Will who I'm speaking with, will as in willpower. It's like, how much willpower do you have? How badly do you want it? Do you want to learn about crypto? And it's not just for crypto. Like, obviously Web3 sort of lives on Discord, but like I assume there's a Discord server for almost anything on the planet. Just a great place to learn.
Yeah. And I would say my experience has been similar. It's getting to be overwhelming, but I think that's, as I, have reached, 50 Discord groups. But when you first are starting, if you get like 6 or, 4 6 small groups, I think it's pretty manageable and it can be very helpful.
Agreed. Well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Truly a treat. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and Oasis online and on socials?
Yeah, so we have our Twitter. That's probably the best place to engage. So we have Oasis Protocol Foundation, which is obviously our foundation side, and we also have Oasis Labs on Twitter. From there, you can hit up our link tree, get access to our Discord. We also have a forum for anyone who has, maybe more on the developer side and has questions on how to build applications on our network. And then also, if you just type in Oasis Protocol Foundation into Google, it should bring you up to our webpage where you can find all the information that you have on Oasis.
And then Will's too humble to plug himself, but on Twitter, Will is Will Full Hodl. That's WILLFULL Hodl, HODL. So hit him up there, LinkedIn as well. Will, really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. Looking forward to round 2 and can just literally congrats to you and the team. You guys are absolutely buzzing and creating a bunch of incredible products that we all need and will truly be using a lot. So appreciate you and the team. Huge shout out.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate you having me on. And thanks. I hope that everyone enjoyed the podcast and, joins our community and does a little bit more research on Oasis. So thanks, everybody.
Folks, what an episode with Will Wendt from Oasis, dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. Tons of incredible insights on privacy, Web3, decentralized infrastructure, security, you name it. It was all here. Huge shout out to Will and the team at Oasis for hooking this up. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would truly mean the world to my team and I. All of the subs really do matter on all podcast platforms. Hit us up on YouTube as well, as we are trying to grow that bad boy. Also, to the listeners, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. To the team, you guys are the GOATs. Love you. Eustace, my amazing sound editor. Appreciate you as always. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags. Keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we will talk soon. Ciao.